All right, so British versus American English, huh? You ready to dive into this with me? It's fascinating how different these two flavors of English can be.
Oh, absolutely. And trust me, we're going way beyond tomato versus tomato. This is about to get really interesting, like uncovering all those little linguistic quirks that make you go, wait, really?
Right, like you start digging into this stuff, and it's a rabbit hole. We're talking history, culture, all wrapped up in how we speak. So I've got all this text about British versus American English, and we're not going to bore you with the dry stuff. Think of this as a deep dive, getting to the good stuff.
Exactly. It's like imagine having a direct line to all the juicy bits, all the aha
Yeah.
moments that make this topic so fun.
Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty, back up a bit for me. How did we even get here? How did one language end up with these two, totally distinct personalities?
Well, think about it, right? It's the 16th, 17th centuries. English settlers, they land in America, bringing their language, of course. But here's the thing, language. It's always changing, adapting, just like people.
It's true. So you've got British English, having its tea and crumpets, quoting Shakespeare, and then American English is out there, taming the Wild West, inventing new words left and right.
Exactly. And this whole evolution, it wasn't just about new words. It was about forging a new identity. Think Noah Webster. That guy was a game changer. 1828, boom. The American Dictionary of the English Language.
Oh, yeah. Webster, he was like, hold my beer, British English. We're doing this our way now.
He really did. I mean, he standardized spellings, embraced American idioms. He basically drew a line in the sand and said, American English is here to stay.
Bold move. You've got to respect that. Though I bet even Webster couldn't have predicted some of the, shall we say, interesting situations this would create.
Oh, absolutely. You mean like when an American tourist innocently asks for a rubber in London and gets some very strange looks.
The classic rubber versus eraser dilemma. And don't even get me started on fanny packs. Talk about a recipe for misunderstanding.
It's like a linguistic minefield out there. But that's what makes this so fascinating, right?
Totally. These simple words, they become like these little windows into whole different cultures, different ways of seeing the world, even senses of humor.
And speaking of humor, let's talk about idioms. Those quirky expressions are like cultural fingerprints.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me some examples. What kind of linguistic curveballs are we talking about here?
All right, picture this. You want to hide a secret. In America, you sweep it under the rug. In Britain, you sweep it under the carpet. Same idea, different furniture.
Huh. It's like we're both speaking in code, but with different code books.
Exactly. Or how about wishing for good luck? Americans knock on wood, but the British touch wood. Superstition, it seems, comes with its own regional variations.
It's amazing how these subtle differences can be so revealing. And while we're on the subject of quirky differences, why does British English feel the need to throw an extra "and" in there when they're counting 125? What's with the extra word?
That one always throws me off a bit too. It's like they're adding a little flourish to their numbers,
Yeah.
just for good measure.
Yeah, maybe those hundreds get lonely without a little company.
Perhaps. And speaking of quirky additions, let's talk about the great Q versus line debate. Why Q, you might ask?
Because in Britain, it's not just a line, it's an institution. It's about patience, order. It's practically an art form.
You're not wrong. Queuing is serious business over there. So yeah, it's not just about the word itself. It's this whole cultural difference in how they approach, lines.
So what you're saying is these little words, they're not just words, they're these little insights into whole ways of life. I love it. Now, this text mentions grammar games, and that has me a little worried. Is British grammar really that different? Are they playing by a different set of rules?
Let's just say they have a different strategy. It's like chess versus checkers. They both have rules, but the complexity,
Oh boy, here we go.
take, for example, subject-verb agreement with collective nouns. American English, pretty straightforward, right? The committee was appointed. The team is playing. Singular noun, singular verb, easy peasy. But British English, they like to keep things interesting.
Uh-oh. I sense a but coming, and I'm not sure I like it.
Well, in British English, it all depends on whether that collective noun is acting as a single unit or as a bunch of individuals. So you might hear, the committee were unable to agree, implying disagreement among members. But then the committee was appointed, suggesting a unified decision.
So it's like their grammar has subtext. It's not just about getting the words right. It's about all those subtle shades of meaning.
Exactly. British English loves its nuances. It's all about reading between the lines, or should I say, between the grammar rules.
You know what? I think you just convinced me that British grammar is like playing chess, while American grammar is definitely more of a checkers game. And honestly, I kind of love that. It's like they're keeping things interesting over there.
It really is. Like they've got this whole extra layer of strategy going on. And speaking of strategy, let's not forget the great spelling standoff.
Yeah.
Our versus our.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like a battle of the U.S.
Oh, yeah. Color versus color, humor versus humor. Those sneaky Brits holding on to those extra across for dear life. It's like they're saying, our way is the fancier way.
I mean, you can't deny there's a certain elegance to it, like adding a monocle to a word, you know?
Okay, I'll give you that. But on the flip side, why are we Americans so obsessed with simplifying everything? Skim milk instead of skimmed milk. Program instead of program. What's the deal with that?
Efficiency, my friend. Why use two letters when one will do?
Time is money, after all.
True. Always got to be streamlining, getting straight to the point. But I do have to admit, those extra letters, they do give British English a certain, I don't know, je ne sais quoi.
A little linguistic flair. It's like the difference between writing with a regular pen and a calligraphy pen. Both get the job done, but one's just a bit more, well, extra.
All right, I can appreciate that. Speaking of extra, those Brits and their dates, it's like they're trying to confuse us. 1/1/2/2024, is that October or December? It's like a linguistic riddle. It's a recipe for disaster, especially in this globalized world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine showing up for a meeting on the wrong day because of a simple date misunderstanding. Talk about awkward.
The horror. And don't even get me started on telling time. Quarter past versus quarter after, half past versus half after. It's like we're speaking different dialects of time itself.
I know, right? It's enough to make your head spin. And why is it that Americans are so obsessed with decimals in sports? Batting averages, field goal percentages, I mean, come on.
Right, like sports weren't confusing enough already. Let's throw some extra math in there. But seriously, do you think there's a reason for that? Or is it just another one of those just because things?
Honestly, it might just be a cultural preference for precision. Americans do love their statistics. But, you know, as we're digging into all these differences, it makes you wonder, are these quirks here to stay? Or are we all slowly becoming more alike because of things like the internet and, you know, just being more connected globally?
Mhm.
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? On the one hand, you've got all this globalization happening, the internet connecting everyone. I mean, we're constantly exposed to each other's dialects now more than ever before, thanks to movies, music, social media. It's like this big linguistic melting pot.
Right. So do you think all those distinct flavors will eventually just blend together?
It's possible. But language is also deeply connected to identity, you know. We cling to those linguistic quirks just like we cherish those traditions that make us unique.
So maybe it's not about merging, but more like coexisting, like finding a balance between keeping those things that make us special and, I don't know, evolving with the times.
Exactly. Plus, language is always changing anyway, right? New words pop up, pronunciations shift, even grammar rules get bent a little. It's this living, breathing thing.
That's true. Okay, so we've talked a lot about words, but what about how we use them? Like, in schools, for example, those must be full of linguistic landmines.
Oh, absolutely. Education's a prime example of how the same words can have totally different meanings depending on which side of the pond you're on. Take public school and private school. In the U.S., public means it's funded by the government, open to everyone. Private usually means you're paying a pretty penny for exclusivity.
Right. But in the UK, it's the opposite. A public school is what we Americans would call private. It's like looking in a linguistic mirror and everything's reversed.
It's a perfect example of how historical context shapes the meaning of words. In the U.S., public education reflects the ideal of equal opportunity for all, right? But in the UK, that term public school is tied to this long history of elite institutions, even if the system itself has changed a lot over time.
It's fascinating how these subtle differences reveal so much, right? It's like the same words, but with completely different baggage. And speaking of different worlds, let's talk politics. I feel like that's a breeding ground for linguistic misunderstandings.
Oh, absolutely. Politics is already a minefield when it comes to language,
Yeah.
even within the same country.
Yeah.
But then you add in cultural differences. Forget about it. It's like trying to navigate a maze in the dark.
I'm intrigued. Give me an example. I love a good linguistic puzzle.
All right, consider the phrase running for office. In the U.S., it conjures up this image of a race, right? Competition, the whole 9 yards.
But in the UK, they stand for election. It's interesting. It's not about a race. It's more about taking a stand, representing something, like you said.
Exactly. Same process, different imagery.
Yeah.
And it's not just about elections either. Even the way Americans talk about government, it often has this negative connotation, like it's this big, faceless bureaucracy.
Whereas in the UK, the government usually means the ruling party, the prime minister, and their crew.
Wow.
It feels closer, more personal somehow.
Exactly. And those little differences in phrasing, they reveal a lot about how each culture views the role of government in their lives.
It's amazing how two tiny letters, the, can completely change the tone of a phrase. It's like the guys have superpowers or something.
They really do. It's all about the nuance. And speaking of subtle shifts in meaning, I've noticed that British and American English sometimes gravitate towards different words for the same financial concepts. Like Americans talk about revenue or sales, but Brits will often use turnover.
Oh, you're right. I've never thought about it like that, but those word choices aren't random, are they? Turnover kind of implies this focus on the cyclical nature of business, while revenue just sounds, I don't know, more bottom line focused, I guess.
Right. It's a subtle difference, but it speaks volumes about different perspectives. And speaking of different perspectives, let's not forget about transportation. Even something as simple as getting from point A to point B can become a linguistic obstacle course when you're dealing with British versus American English.
Oh, tell me about it. Cabs versus taxis, trucks versus lorries, even what you call the front of your car bonnet versus hood. It's enough to make you want to just stay home.
And don't even get me started on the eternal struggle of remembering if it's a return ticket or a round-trip ticket. One little word, a world of difference.
It's true. And then there's the whole world of television, right? With its own set of transatlantic linguistic hurdles. Series versus seasons, programs versus programs. It's enough to make your head spin.
It really is. It's like trying to follow two different conversations at the same time. But you know what I find most fascinating about all of this?
What's that?
It's how these differences remind us that language is so much more than just words, you know? It's this reflection of our history, our values, the things that make us who we are. It's like language is a mirror to our souls, in a way.
It's like a linguistic fingerprint, unique and endlessly fascinating.
It really is. It shows us that language is alive, you know?
Yeah.
It's constantly changing and evolving right alongside us.
Absolutely. And it's those quirks, those little variations that make it so fascinating. Like, I was reading in this text about equivalent idioms, which, okay, fancy term, but basically it just means two ways of saying the same thing, but with a twist. You know, like how we Americans say, don't throw a monkey wrench in the works, but the British say, don't put a spanner in the works. Same idea, different tools.
Exactly. And it's those little differences that add so much color and personality to how we express ourselves. And it's not just about tools either. How about blowing one's own trumpet versus doing one's own horn, or a storm in a teacup versus a tempest in a teapot?
It's like we're both painting the same picture, but we've got different sets of brushes. And while we're on the subject of those quirky Brits, can we talk about that whole adding an and after 100 thing? 125, why the extra word? What's the deal with that?
Honestly, there's no definitive answer. Some folks say it's a leftover from older counting systems, while others think it just sounds more formal. Either way, it just goes to show you how even the tiniest details can reveal something interesting about how a language has evolved over time.
It's like finding a hidden message in a centuries-old text. And those little discoveries, those are what make this whole linguistic exploration so much fun.
I couldn't agree more. Because at the end of the day, uncovering these nuances reminds us that communication isn't just about shared vocabulary, right? It's about understanding the context, the unspoken rules, all those subtle cues that give language its richness.
It's like learning a secret handshake, a way of connecting on a whole other level. And, you know, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the historical roots of British and American English to all those delightful quirks that make them unique. But as we wrap things up, I'm left with a question. We've talked about convergence and divergence, about globalization and technology, all those forces shaping language today. So what do you think the future holds for British and American English? Will they continue to grow further apart, or will we see them start to blend together?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The one that keeps linguists up at night. It's tempting to say that, yeah, maybe those lines will start to blur, especially with technology connecting us more and more every day. But language is also incredibly resilient. It adapts, it innovates, it finds new ways to surprise us.
So you're saying instead of disappearing, these differences might just, I don't know, evolve, take on new forms.
Exactly. New words will pop up, pronunciations will shift, even grammar rules might bend a little. Who knows, maybe we'll even see a whole new dialect emerge, something totally unique, a blend of British and American English shaped by the digital age.
Now, that would be something. It just goes to show, when it comes to language, the only constant is change. So to all our listeners out there, keep those ears open, your dictionaries handy, and embrace those linguistic quirks, because you never know what fascinating discoveries await. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the ever-evolving world of British and American English.